Hey everyone, on today's show, we're giving you part one of our masterclass in startup marketing. We're going to talk to you about how you hire your team, how you tell the right story, how you pick your customer persona, how you get distribution for your product. We're covering some of the key lessons to building a business all on today's show. Let's get to today's episode. On today's show, what we want to talk to you all about is we get endless questions around how do I actually think about building and organizing and doing marketing for my company. And we wanted to try to create the masterclass episode on like the core essential advice that we basically give everybody. And it's in Looms and Zooms and emails, and we want to bring it together all in one place on the pod, because if you like it and this gets good reception, we've thought about maybe making a little book that would kind of be the startup marketing Bible if this gets good reception. So this is a little bit of a test balloon for everybody listening and watching today's show around this advice. So I think it's gonna be fun. Kieran, anything else you want to add before we get into it?
No, we've got a cool name for the book. We've got a cool idea for the book. So I think this is a good precursor to potentially becoming book writers. Although I do hear it's an absolute grind.
Well, we'd also have a third co-writer, which is AI. So don't think that we have forgotten our AI passion and love and all of this. We're just taking a quick break from all things AI and going deep into marketing advice today. Okay. The number one area, so to kind of map out today's show, we're going to talk to you all about the things that we think are the most important, that we have learned over the last couple of decades that really are critical in marketing. The first thing is people. Like if you have a bad marketing leader or a bad team, you will fail at marketing. And Kieran, what I would love for you is to give you the advice of, if the company's just getting started, what type of marketer do they need? And subsequently, how do they find and identify that person?
First of all, what marketer should a startup, let's say that we're going to speak to a startup, maybe series B and beyond, A and B beyond, because I think it changes probably who you want to hire. Like a startup in a kind of pre-seed, C stage is going to hire a jack of all trades, as they should, a really good growth person, No, I don't want to say growth marketer, because I think that it gets tossed about that word, but like just someone who can like really figure out some initial plays to get you some traction, and then you have to get into more forecastable, predictable channels as you get into Series A, and definitely B and beyond. So on the people side of things, the founder is always trying to figure out, should they hire a seasoned CMO first of all, or someone who can grow into a CMO? Like that's one of the things they continue to think about. I think part of how they should think about that is just how rapidly you're going to grow. If you're not going to grow very rapidly, a seasoned CMO would probably get bored by some of the work that you have to do for a certain period of time. But how you hire, like I've come to the conclusion that I think what a CEO should do here is, so most good companies do try to utilize advisors.
Yes.
And I think they utilize advisors in a very mixed way, right? Like that, it's kind of, I think in a lot of cases, they probably don't get a ton of value for the amount of equity or other things they give those advisors, because the challenge is they don't have the ability to instrument the advice the advisor is giving them because they're limited in resources. I do think on the people side of things, I'm going to get into like the type of people, but I do think on the people side for marketing, because marketing can be so subjective, that is where an advisor can play a crucial role for the founder. I think they can actually help them understand the problems to solve in the next 2 to 3 years. They can help them understand the right type of marketing leader that can go after those and the kind of background. They can be part of the interview panel to make sure that that person can actually do the work and is just not talking about the work in a way whether their team did it all or someone else did it all and they were just part of the work. And they can actually set up the right expectations between both of those people. So the CEO has the right expectations from that person and where that person is going to show up really well and where that person is not going to show up as well because that's not their area of expertise. So I'd kick it back to you there. That's what I would start with, because I think that's the most, what I see going wrong at this part for startups is they probably don't understand the right problems they should solve through marketing in the next couple of years. They don't understand how to kind of map that to the right type of marketer. And then the interview process, they can meet someone who just is an incredible talker, and they really can't uncover whether that person is truly great at that kind of work or not.
Yeah. So let me add to what you were just saying. Most startup founders at all stages that I talk to are over-index on experience that person has. Not that experience isn't important, but they look at experience as the end-all and be-all. And what instead I would encourage everyone to do is to say, this is the specific type of company I run. This is the business strategy for my company. Based on those things, here's the list of 3 to 5 things that I need my marketing team to be great at. For this business to work, I need these 3 to 5 things. And there'll be some mix of brand awareness, product marketing, new customer acquisition, sales enablement, all of these things, right? But you got to get very crystal clear on what those things are. Do not get caught up on level. Don't get caught up on anything. Once you're clear on what that list is, the 1 or 2 you put it in priority order. And the 1 or 2 things that are at the top that are like the essential things to making this business work, you need to go and talk to 5 people who are the best in the world at those things. And so if you're saying like, hey, I want to new customer acquisition, like I need to acquire hundreds of thousands of customers a month to make my business work, then you need to go talk to Kieran, you need to go talk to some e-commerce folks, you need to talk to a bunch of folks and see what good looks like. And pick the best one of those folks to be an advisor for your company and help them identify, this back to what you were saying, Kieran, the type of person and vet that candidate. And what you want is to talk to the best people with those skills. I don't care if they're a director, a VP, a CMO, what have you. And then once you get into the last handful of candidates, you can determine the best level and fit for this particular role, but you want to be obsessed about the skills more than the experience and the title of that role. That is the foundational advice we would give you around the marketing team and people side of what you're trying to do.
Because if you think about hiring, like the founder, if the top 3 things, they've actually done them prior, so they do have experience, then the founder probably can identify pattern match and see, is that person truly good at that thing or not? But that's what the advisor in that space can do. Like to your point, if that person is really an expert within that space, they can pattern match across all of these potential candidates and see what good really looks like. Like I was helping a portfolio company hire someone recently, and one of the candidates was probably in the top, percentile, a couple of percent of people I've ever talked to for that role. And I have enough experience and done enough interviews to be able to see that pretty quickly. And I think that's like one of the ways that you can, an early stage founder can try to not do the thing that a lot of early stage founders do, is like get the first couple of hires wrong. Mm-hmm. And that sets them way, way back.
Well, this goes into our second piece of advice, is that if you're the founder, if you're the CEO of this business, you are actually the CMO. You are driving the marketing strategy. This is something our friend of the pod, Jason Limpkin, always says, that the CEO is really the CMO. And what that means is, if you are running a company and you're like, I don't know really what my marketing strategy should be, and I'm going to hire a seasoned marketer come in and tell me what that is, you have failed. You failed. Like, you might as well just quit that business. What you have to actually do is say, I understand my business strategy. Because of this, I understand what I need marketing to do and do very well. And normally, the CEO is the best product marketer in the company. They're the best brand marketer in the company. And they have some understanding of like the acquisition, demand generation model and what's required for that business, right? And because of that, and they're the best at that, not because they're great at marketing, it's because they have the most intimate understanding of the customer, the problem, and the strategy. And your number one job is, and I see this a lot with technical founders, Kieran, is that they don't want to embrace the marketing side of their business. They want to fall in love with the technology. I'm here to tell you that embracing the core understanding of marketing and then making sure you get somebody on board who can then take that understanding and scale it out into a real strategy and build a real business, that is worth the time and effort, just as much as writing lines of code or interviewing engineers or other work is. Do you agree?
Yeah, the CEO, because then you can actually set the right expectations. So kind of following along from the people, if you are working for a founder, you want to understand what good looks like for that founder. And if they are not sure, then I can guarantee you what will happen is you will not meet their expectations, because those expectations will be formed along the way and you might not have the skill set to deliver on them, because they change along the way to things that you aren't good at delivering upon. So you kind of want to know, does the founder understand how marketing should show up? What are the things they need to deliver upon? What does good look like? And if you get that understanding beforehand, you're going to have a much better chance of succeeding within that company. And I think any great founder has knowledge of how they are going to accelerate their product roadmap and their go-to-market roadmap. And they have they've done enough homework to understand, well, what are the places that I need to win? Again, to your point on people. So I agree. I think that is if you are a CMO working with a founder, that person should understand the marketing strategy and where you need to show up and build a world-class team.
Hey everyone, from one marketer to another, I want to help you out. It's tough keeping up with the content demands each year, especially across a variety of content channels. Balancing the workload while still maintaining quality can be a real challenge for everyone. We've got a free guide from HubSpot on how to use AI to make that all easier. It walks you through how to integrate AI tools into your content workflows so that you can come up with more ideas and spend less time implementing them. This is going to save you a ton of time and a ton of money. I don't know what else I have to say. I've dropped the link in the description below. You're going to want to go check it out. Now back to today's show. Okay. We've talked a lot about the founder and the team at the start of this podcast. The other kind of the third leg of this stool is the customer. And Kieran, you and I talk about it around being very clear on who you serve. And that is very different from who buys your product, right? Lots of different people may choose to buy your product. Who you serve is the person that you most want to buy your product, the type of person, the type of buyer, the persona that you most want to buy your product, that you're willing to bend yourself into knots to make sure that that person has a great product and a great buying experience with your company, right? And what I find from most founders I talk to, Kieran, when I am out, when I'm just like, I don't need to be part of this conversation anymore, is when a founder's like, oh yeah, let me tell you, we got like a $3 million, $5 million revenue business. We got 6 personas, and they're in these verticals, and this is how we're kind of sub-optimizing for each of those. And I'm like, oh, you're gonna fail. You're gonna fail real fast because you spread yourself too thin. You're too sub-optimized. You are not clear on you do not have the courage to select the one person that you are really out there to solve and differentiate for. And Kieran, you've built a lot of personas. You have done a lot of this work. Maybe share with everybody, how do you actually make that bold decision to say, hey, this is the one specific type of person that we choose to serve and help?
It's also where you win, right? I think
exactly.
This is like who you serve, where you win. And I think that where you win matters because who are you going to serve in a much better way than any of the others, and like you are going to win against competitors because you've chosen to serve that person really well. Like we have the age-old case study of HubSpot, where HubSpot decided to focus on a singular persona versus multiple personas. We did a Market and Mary versus Ollie owner, but like basically mid-market versus SMB, and we got very clear about the person within mid-market. The other way you could look at this, especially if you're a horizontal company, is one way. Horizontal companies are a little different in that they do attract a ton of people into their business, and they are serving many people because their product is lightweight. You can try it out. You can buy it touchlessly, all of these different things. And so you would look at your retention, right? Like what cohort do I have the best retention with and why? That's actually how we decided who we would serve for for the initial HubSpot CRM, and it changed over time as the product became more sophisticated. But I come back to like, okay, well, where do we win? Or how are we going to win with this individual? How are we going to win with this group of customers? in a way that is differentiated from all of the others. Like, who are we laser focused, targeted on, that we believe we're going to have the best product in the market for? And again, this comes from the founder. I find in a lot of businesses where the founder doesn't have clear perspective on that, everything else is somewhat messy. The product roadmap is messy, the marketing is messy, the sales org is messy, because there's not laser focused on the one demographic or type of target customer that you are trying to all serve and excel at.
Well, the reason for this, Kieran, is you hear a lot of founders, a lot of venture capitalists, a lot of experts talking about differentiation. We talk a lot about differentiation. You have to be differentiated against your competitor. The challenge is you cannot be differentiated if you are not very specific on who you serve, because who you serve facilitates the differentiation, right? When Steve Jobs was leading the original kind of disruption of Microsoft, he focused in on creative users, right? For the Mac. It was all around, hey, I am working for the creatives, the designers, the video editors, those folks. And because of that, it informed all of the design, product, go-to-market decisions of that company. And it allowed Apple to be very different from Microsoft and Dell and everybody else that was playing in that space. And if you're not clear on who you serve, you cannot be differentiated.
Exactly. All of the reasons we don't do that is because we're trying to de-risk.
Yeah, we're afraid. We are afraid of making a hard decision.
Right. We just want to de-risk things. If we try to serve all of the people, maybe we'll be more successful. And I think you have to de-risk things. You have to actually take on more risk and be more pointed about who you're going to solve for and how you win.
The next one, Kieran, is unequivocally, I think, our number one. These were not in priority order. These are in, we kind of think chronological order of like kind of how you have to deal with them. But the next rule that you kind of have to obsess over as a founder is distribution is greater than everything else. How you get low cost, effective distribution of your product to the market is everything. Full stop. This is what happens. I talked to a bunch of founders, Kieran, you talked to a bunch of founders. When a company is Series A, Series B, the majority are selling to mid-market companies, and they have annual contract value of $5,000 to $12,000, right? Average customer is paying them $5,000 to $12,000 a year. And if that's the case, you have two options. You have to go up market and get those customers to pay $250,000 a year instead of $5,000 to $10,000, and that's very hard, and most companies fail at that. The other thing most companies fail at is saying, well, all right, I just need thousands and thousands and thousands of customers to pay me that $10,000 a year, so I need to go and find and attract those. They never invest in the distribution engine of their business. Kieran, you are, in my personal opinion, one of the best experts in the world at building distribution engines. Can you demystify for people watching and listening today what it really means to figure out distribution for their business?
You have to, okay, so
he's like, I'm ready for this.
So I think you have to invest in a predictable and forecastable distribution engine, right? That is like the hardest thing to do as a startup. And it's one of the frameworks that we have used before time and time again on this pod is like, you have this kind of notion of product market fit, and everyone kind of understands that. Product market fit is when, a startup releases the product and they start to look for what cohort of users retention starts to flatten out for, and that's like, you start to get a kind of perspective, do you have product market fit or not? Or there's a really good one from Sean Ellis, which is really, can you live without this product or not? And does it score higher than an 8 out of 1 to 10? And, Brian Balfour, friend of the show, CEO of Reforge, I talked to him one time and he was like talking about, product market fit, product channel fit actually. And at the same time you're trying to build product market fit, you're trying to understand what channels can I build repeatable distribution for my product. And so, HubSpot was an example of a brand that really figured out product channel fit. At the same time, they figured out product market fit because they built kind of these distribution engines that demonstrated the concept of inbound, which is one of the advantages for HubSpot, right? So we said, hey, like inbound marketing works. You can scale through search, and you can scale through paid, and you can scale through creating content. And so for us to demonstrate that, we did it at the same time. And that way we kind of built our distribution engine at the same time as our product engine. And so the reason I'm kind of, humming and hawing about this is it's harder than it's ever been, I think, to build a scalable and forecastable and predictable distribution engine, right? You have to figure out, like, what channels do I have? What channels can I build leverage on or leverage in? So an example, the one that I have used time and time again that I've always loved is, Genius.com figured out how to be the number one lyric site, not because they had a better product, because the product just regurgitates lyrics. It's because they figured out how to add a feature around adding annotations to sentences within the rap song, and that the user generated content increased the value of each page, and then each page began to rank better in Google, and that way they built an incredible distribution engine. For a lot of gaming companies, they really figure out a model that would generate low CAC, low cost to acquire a customer, paid advertising programs, and they can really scale those things to hundreds of millions of dollars. And so there's no, like, I don't know if there's any secrets other than when you step back and think about, okay, well, here are the channels that are big enough for me to grow into, and I have to figure out a way that I can create something or build something into my product or build something into my go-to-market that gets me more leverage than other companies, that gives me more differentiation to be successful in there than other companies. Whether that is you're building freemium tools, whether you're doing paid advertising. I think it's really hard to get any kind of leverage in paid advertising right now because the algorithms do a lot of the work for you. Search, another one that you can try to figure out how to do something differentiated in. Obviously, that is being somewhat disrupted right now as well. So you have to figure it out, but it's really hard.
I've one twist on this, right, Kieran? Because you're saying it's hard. I think we should explain why it's hard. And the reason it is hard is because you want something that is predictable and high leverage, right? Like that's literally the definition of low cost distribution. It's like, oh, I can get that distribution on a reoccurring basis, and I have leverage, and so because I have leverage, it's low cost, right? The reality is the person who finds low-cost distribution is somebody who applies process and rigor to unproven areas, right? Like when HubSpot, when we dominated search was very much in its infancy, right? When we choose to invest. It doesn't mean that you're like the only people doing it, but the minority of the market is doing this thing, right? And so, like, let's use paid advertising, for example. You can get really predictable results from paid advertising today, but they're low leverage because everybody's bidding against you, right? What the people who are really great say, like, oh, I found this affiliate program, or I found this way to work with these specific creators in my market. They find some way to do paid media in a scalable, different way than everybody else that gets them leverage. And so the challenge when you're the founder of a startup is if you just go hire that pragmatic, data-oriented person to build your distribution, it won't work. Because that person also has to be wildly creative and competitive, right? Like, there's some people out there that just want to build a machine, Kieran. And you and I have met all the people that want to build the machine. The difference between those people and you and I believe, is that we are very creative and we like the discovery of the new opportunity, right? And you need somebody who really kind of has that sensibility to do that.
Yeah. Let's debate this one a tiny bit, because it's very similar to a conversation I had with a startup founder recently. But I think I might have been on the other side. So if you have a 2x2, which is high impact, low impact, high leverage, low leverage, and leverage in this way is you have some differentiated way to win within that channel, or you discovered a new channel, right? That you are like one of the fast followers to a new channel. You want to be in the quadrant where you are high impact, high leverage, right? That's kind of what you're arguing is you want to have things that you are either have some sort of unique advantage in an existing channel that gets you above average results, or you have a new channel that you can work on because you are doing differentiated things. I think the challenge for startups, there's two core challenges actually. First of all, I spent a lot of time trying to think about that quadrant, and we don't have the new things. There's not like the new things coming out, like new channels, new things that are coming out that have real scale. You could argue being able to monetize social video is a potential one, right? That if you find out a new way to directly monetize social video.
One of the most successful public companies of the last year, Abercrombie and Fitch, was a dead clothing brand that nobody was buying anything of. And they used influencers and online video to grow faster than NVIDIA. Like, so it's not that it's not possible. That's B2C.
Yeah, it's not. That's a good B2C example. I was really thinking through B2B, right? That's a good B2C example. And I do put some things in there, right? But that's not a new channel. That's a reimagining of their brand in that channel.
Here's an example. All right. I work with a company in Brazil, and they're looking to reach head of like logistics and the people who manage like all the cars and fleets for companies. Would you agree that there's like, you can't get any more B2B than that, right?
That's a very B2B example.
Very, very B2B example. We were talking about like high leverage distribution plays, and we were talking about, oh, well, maybe we do some video, maybe do some creator plays. And then we kind of got to talking. We're like, oh, well, what's unique about you all is that you're in Brazil. And there's a lot of business people in Brazil care about, they still read James Clear Atomic Habits. They care about all of these mainstream business things, but they're just far less accessible, right? Because they're not in their language and all this. I was like, what if we go and license some of the YouTube content, newsletter content, and we go work with some of those people that all of your audience deeply respects to bring a Portuguese version to the market, and you are the premier monetization around that. Like, that works. Like, that is high leverage, high distribution work. It's hard. There's a bunch of manual negotiations. You might have to overpay somebody. You might have to do a few things to get it going. But yes, it is harder to do this work today, but it is still possible. Because and it's harder because the channels have matured a lot more, right?
Yeah, well,
but it's still possible.
My point there was there's not many new channels. I think the examples you were given is how you can have creative people still find leverage in existing channels. I do agree with that. I think it's harder to find people who are truly creative enough to do that. But the second point is really the more important one, is if you are a early stage startup, what do you need within your marketing model? Predictability. And I think that's the hard thing, because you kind of are tasked with doing the new thing, whereas the old thing is a predictable thing, right? It's easy for me to put in some dollars and pay it and predict what I'm going to get back. It's somewhat easy for me to predict what I'm going to get back from search over time. But trying to find these different points of leverage and do things in much differentiated ways is harder to build a predictable and forecastable model about. And they still may have a ton more upside. And maybe the answer here is startups they're just going to have to do this because the existing channels are too saturated, too crowded anyway. But that is where most startups struggle in this area, is they kind of need to know where my dollars are coming from each and every month.
Well, this is a radical debate. I'm glad we're having it on the show today. Is what you just said true?
That they need, which part? Do they need predictability, or that it's not predictable?
Is that true?
I think it's true. Like, they have to show, if you're a VC funded startup, you have to show pretty good growth rates. This is intentionally each radical, and every month.
But if that was the case, then wouldn't most startups succeed and not fail?
You'd have to tell me more.
If it was as simple as, hey, we need predictability, and we're in search of predictability, and we can get some predictability, then in doing that, you would expect a much higher percent of startups and companies to be successful. Like, you could make the argument that once you're a venture-backed startup, I'm making this argument, it's very radical, that you have to 10x your revenue once you take venture money, right? And the likelihood of 10xing that revenue over very basic, iterative, predictable results it's possible, but it's not high likelihood. The highest likelihood is to find some means of distributions that's asymmetric, that allows you to attract customers in an asymmetrical way and drive that growth. So yes, do you need predictability? Yes, but if predictability is all you have, you'll probably never get to the outcome that you're trying to get to. I guess it's my concern.
Yeah, well, like, I guess you could argue, I think building a predictable engine is really, really hard, because then you have to get outsized gain. Like, they're all trying to 10x their money. So you're being tasked with trying to get 10x growth from channels that are saturated and hard to be differentiated in. I guess what I would have in a forecastable model there is probably known growth and unknown growth, right? And I would bucket my plays into known growth, and they would be in the highish impact, mediocre leverage, because we have to do these things to get some growth. And then I would have bigger bets in the high impact, high leverage that are unknown growth, but we believe this accounts for 50% of the overall 100% of growth over the course of the next number of years. So I think for early stage startups, the takeaway here, the distribution and everything, is you have to have some amount of growth coming from existing channels, and you have to find really great people to figure out how to get leverage within those channels above and beyond what the average company gets. But you also really need to have a certain percentage of your growth coming from the things that you have no idea will work or not.
Yeah, like, I think the analog to this, to be really specific and not be hyperbolic here, is in the early days of HubSpot, I think paid was like half of our demand. And that allowed us to have a lot of predictability in the demand for the sales team that was coming in. And we had email, we had some other plays, and the search play was just kind of getting started, right? And search at that point was maybe 20% of demand. And over the course of a couple years, search became 60% of demand and paid became like 20% of demand. And that's the magic trick you're trying to pull off, is you're trying to kind of have an inverse relationship between your low leverage and high leverage channels over time, right?
Yeah.
And you're trying to have enough predictable lower leverage channels in the early days to buy you time to find the high leverage means of distribution.
Right. Agreed.
Okay. I feel like, Kieran, we should make this a 2-part episode, because I feel like we got so much ground to cover. So I think we should cover one more and call that the end of part 1, and then take the rest of our advice and do a whole separate part 2 episode around it. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, we're not going to get to and that sounds good, because there's little chance that we're going to cover 5 to 9 in the time we have left. And number 5 is a pretty good one.
Well, part of why I want to do this is I want to make sure we spend time on number 5. And our 5th piece of advice for anybody who's starting and running a business is that your story is the cure for apathy with your customers. And that if you do not have a story, you don't have a business. Kieran, you are one of the most logical, rational human beings I've ever met. And over the last few years, you have fallen in love. You have fallen in love with stories and the importance of stories. Explain to everybody why stories are so important.
You can go through the history of time. I actually have done this, by the way. I've looked at the human evolution and its connection with stories. Humans are story-making machines. If you actually go all the way back through time, we understand the world through stories. Think of your best podcasters. You and I talk about this all the time. The best podcasters are storytellers. They have incredible stories and teachings that they interweave within each other, right? I think to bring anything to life, if you are able to, even if you want to be a great content creator, the more that you can bring your content to life through these stories that teach the lessons or whatever you want them to do, you're just going to resonate with people much, much more. And it is incredibly hard to tell a story that people actually care about, because you are not competing against like other brands who tell their story. You're competing against everyone who's telling a story across these channels, which is why we've kind of made the case on this podcast before that a lot of the leverage is shifting much more towards the individual than the brand, because it's easier for me to show up on social video or YouTube or podcast and tell stories about myself or tell stories about other individuals versus companies. I think they just resonate more with people. But the story is what people connect with the most, right? There's probably products you're using every single day that are not the best products in their market, but you truly connect with that brand story. So, the story that HubSpot told was we kind of told the story of marketing, and that as a marketeer, you were stuck doing outbound marketing. You were thought of in a pretty negative light. Because of that, you didn't have a seat at the kind of grown-ups table. Like, you weren't able to go to that grown-ups table and talk about your work because you couldn't connect it to revenue. And it really just wasn't a cool profession to be in because of that. And the transformational change for all marketers is, hey, you want to really create a ton of customer value. You want to be able to connect your work to revenue. There's this thing called inbound. You can now do that through these channels. You don't need to interrupt your consumer. You can actually create things that they want to interact with, create value for them before they ever want to use your product, right? And it was this kind of transformational story of like, oh, wow, yeah, you're telling the story of how I feel today and how I could feel much, much better in the future. Like, you're telling the story of how I can be a better version of myself. And that, for the most part, is what people want from products. Like, even the most mundane B2B product, it's not the features that anyone is really buying. It's the story of how their life gets better by using that product, right? If you're using any kind of, even if someone's using a B2B product, like, they're able to do something much better that can help them get a career change, that can help them get a salary increase because that tool has helped them to be more successful in their job in some way.
Yeah, I think what you're looking for, and I think what the challenge is, most companies don't tell stories because they're afraid to make hard calls, right? Like, if you use that inbound marketing story, Kieran, one of the core things is that it had an enemy. That enemy was outbound marketing. That enemy was direct mail, billboards, TV advertisements, the yellow pages, all of those things, right? Most companies are afraid to call people out and call out that the current status quo is bad, because they're like, well, I'm trying to sell to people who think the current status quo is good. Why am I going to alienate the people I'm selling to? And the reality is, you're like, look, when you're getting started, you're selling to the forward-leading 10 to 20% of the curve that's like, man, I am bored. The stuff I'm doing stinks and I need a new way, right? And you're like, I want to give I'm just desperately searching for a new way. And so if you're bold enough to declare an enemy, to paint a clear path forward, then people will follow you. And what I find also with founders, Kieran, is that founders are so smart. They're so logical that they forget that all buying decisions are emotional. Like, all the data in the history of business points to how emotional buying decisions are. And you cannot elicit emotion without a great story. Like, I bet, maybe this is a future episode, Kieran. I wonder if we picked a couple public market segments and we had Claude go out and rank the companies in that segment based on their like breadth and depth of storytelling and clarity, and just did that, and then we lined up market cap to those. I bet you they would line up perfectly, right? That whoever Claude picked number one is probably the market cap leader, right? And maybe we'll do that for a follow-up show to kind of demonstrate that there's a direct correlation between your ability to tell really good stories and the value of that business. But the reality is, the actual advice we are giving you here is, if your business is about features and functions, somebody is going to come and disrupt you with story. It is not your product does X, Y, or Z. It is your customer has this problem, and you are bringing them a new way to solve that problem that is going to make their life much better. If you are not doing that in your business, you are not going to break out. You're not going to have the growth in your startup that you're looking for. Okay, so that's storytelling. That's also going to be the end of part one. We talked to you about how to hire the right first marketing hire for your business. We talked to you how to be the CMO as the CEO of your business. We talked to you about how to nail and get clarity on your customer and who you serve and why that is so important and allows you to differentiate. We talked to you about the reason distribution is more important than anything else in marketing and how you could go about building a distribution engine. And we talked to you about the importance of storytelling. And then if you don't have storytelling in your business, that you're going to fail and somebody's going to come along and disrupt you with story. That's part one. We got way more for you in part 2. You want to check back on the channel next week, and we'll be back with part 2. Until then, we'll see you next time on Marketing Against the Grain.
This data is wrong every freaking time.
Have you heard of HubSpot? HubSpot is a CRM platform where everything is fully integrated.
Whoa, I can see the client's whole history, calls, support tickets, emails, and here's a task from 3 days ago I totally missed.
HubSpot. Grow better.